Today in the shop, we're working on an Aero Solus in an MTT chassis. Local guy dropped it off. He wants it turned into, you guessed it, 22 Creedmoor. So I'll show you the indication process, kind of do a deep dive into an Aero Solus. Pretty easy action, a lot like a Savage with the shoulder. So let's get to it. Alright, I've been playing around with these. This hose that goes over the barrel, and it works, but it's not 100%. If I tighten the living snot out of it, I haven't had too many issues, but if it's at all loose, it can cause a problem. These blanks I get are 27 inches long, so if a person wants a 26-inch barrel, I use these. If not, I'm still going back with the threading of the end. It's just prevented me a lot of messes. Just a heads up and an update on that one. So I was getting some critiques about how far out I extend these. And the reason I do it is I want to turn my threads and then go 1.5 inches or so beyond. So when I grab a hold of this with the chuck, I have something to indicate against when I do my contouring, because I hold it on this end. Alright, so I got this all tightened in the lathe, and now got to measure this. And the reason I measure this is I set all my work set offsets to the face of the chuck. Okay, so all these tools right here in my Z are all set to this. So I have two different numbers I use for my offsets, a G54 and a G55. G54 is just like if I wanted to throw this tool in there and start turning something off the machine program, I use it. But a complete program, I use G55. So all the tools kind of coincide with each other. So if I go here and measure 2.988, I want to take a facing cut. So I'm going to take you to the computer here. And we're going to go offset, offset. And then we're going to go to our work offset. Well, I'll hold you steady here. And we got 2.970. So that's pretty close. We'll just use that one. It'll take off an 18 thousandths facing cut. So that number matches this number. It sticks out 2.8 or whatever. And then all these are shifted this way from the chuck. And now all we got to do is start our cutting process. But before we can cut, we got to indicate our barrel end. And I'm going to do a complete video on all the indication processes. I'm going to bring up. Alright, I got my program loaded. I push play, cycle start. It takes it to the home position. Then I'm going to push cycle start again. It's going to come over to the center. And this chuck is indicated perfectly to the center of the spindle bore. And that's by design. So now I take my long stem indicator and I get it set on my angle here, because we got angular run out and radial run out of a barrel. So we're just going to stick it in here, find a number. We'll say number 4. Come down on the lands, and I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see it. We'll zoom in a little more. There we go. We'll maybe shift it over so you can see this whole process here. Alright, you're going to see the needle bounce, and that's on the land. So 1, 2, 3. See how the needle went down a little bit? Then we're going to go up. 1, 2, 3. The reason I count is the bounces. If I count the bounces, I don't run my indicator into the chuck. So 1, 2, 3. Alright, so we're going down. Now we got to raise the barrel up. So to do that, we're going to raise it up. And we got to go just past where we need to be. So we're going to raise it. Raise it up. Okay. And then we go back in. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Dropping about a half thousandth or 5/10. So we'll raise it up a little bit more. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, you can see now that needle's bouncing the same place every single time. Okay? So we got this one done on number 4. You can see here, number 4. So now I'm going to turn this 90 degrees. And now we got to get this plane indicated right here. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to zoom you in on the indicator. And in. 1, 2, 3. Go back to 0. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We got to raise up just a freckle. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Just a little bit more. All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, perfect. So now we're bouncing the same spot every time. So I always go back to our first one we did, make sure it's still doing the same thing. All right. So now this barrel is indicated this way and this way, perfectly concentric to the bore of the machine. These long stem indicators, they can, just because this says it's a half thou, it's actually right at a thou between every one of these marks. And the reason being the stem got longer. If you guys ever want to test them, just take a feeler gauge of known thickness and put it on here and then just slide this under it. See how much it moves compared to the dial, and then interpolate. So this one was 1,000th, and this one is a half thousandths or 5/10. So a human hair is about 2/1000ths of an inch. So this is a quarter of a human hair, a little less. So we're going to go in, and I go in to where the lands touch. I got a little mark here. This is for a Creedmoor, and this is where the lands are touching. And we're going to set this on the barrel, the lands or the grooves of the barrel, and you can see it bouncing. I'll focus there. And it sweeps and bounces, and then bounces are the lands it's picking up. So I find the drop, so it's dropping here, and then I drop the same amount on the other side. So we'll go to the high side there. Okay. Now I got to get that to 0, because we got to meet in the middle. So I'm going to loosen this and tighten this, and then we're going to go around. So now we're within 1,000th of an inch, and I do the same thing. There to there. And I go to my high side. Okay, we're going to take away this. And this is where it gets super touchy. Okay, we're getting closer. I'm going to blow that out. I have a piece of lint in there or something. Okay, the air compressor kicked on. So I shut her off here. Go back. Make sure you're zeroed in. There we go. We're in focus. High. Low. So we're going to loosen this one. And tighten this one. I think I went the wrong way. I went way too far. Way too far. This is where it gets touchy because we're dealing with a quarter of a human hair. Alright, we're getting closer. Split the difference to 0. Cinch this up a little bit. Zero, 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 zero. All right, we are bouncing on 0 every time. So now we got the barrel indicated radially and angularly to the machine. So now we can start our cutting process. So I take this out. And I'm going to go to our program and push play. Alright, this is going to go kind of fast. I wrote the program. We got our offset set. We're going to push play. Got everything tight. And I'll walk you through it. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. First thing's going to do, it's going to face it, that 18 thousandths. Next thing it's doing is going to cut the tenon. Since this is a shoulder tenon, this is where our threads and stuff are going to go. And this is giving us something brand new that I can indicate off. So when I do my contouring, the outside of the barrel perfectly matches the inside of the barrel. So Aero uses the same thread pattern as a Savage. Inch and an 1/16, 20 threads per inch. This is the chamfer. It's going to go and then it's going to stop. I'll leave a spot for the recoil lug. You can see that right here. Next thing it's going to do is go directly to the threading profile. So it's switching over to thread it. I slowed down my pass count to 30 threads, or 30 passes on my threads. The reason I did that, if I take too big of a pass, not so much with 20 threads per inch, but like the Tika's with 16 threads per inch, and sticking out there, I was getting a hair amount of chatter with 20 passes. So I just extended it out to 30 passes so it takes less every time. But yeah, I'm making some nice threads there. And CNC is so fascinating to me. There's a guy on there that has, on YouTube, that has a machine from Babin Machine. And the first time I watched him do a rifle, I was sold. I was absolutely fascinated with it. Now it's going to do a finishing cut. It's going to do the shoulder to give a nice clean shoulder, and then it's going to take a skim pass over everything. As threads are cut, that metal expands. So instead of using a topping bit, I just come back with my cutting bit and top them with the cutter, and then do a cleanup pass with my threading insert. This will take 5 passes and then a skim pass. And just like that, we have a threaded tenon. So this might not screw on because I like to fit threads to the action. So it might be just a little tight, which it is. So with the manual machine, you take a pass and you come back and you fit it, and then you take another pass. With CNC, we just move our tool offsets in. Like we're just tell the machine the tool wore. So I'm going to take an offset here, and we're going to cut another pass on our threads. And this beeping you hear is just telling me telling the computer that our tool wore a little bit. So we're going to go memory, I got that in there, and we're going to go back to our 5 thread pass. So where's that at? Roughing, threading. So now it's going to come in and it's going to take 5 passes, and we're going to take off a little bit more material to fit this to the action. Now if I had a couple of these to do, once they get my thread offset done to the Solus, I would never have to do anything in the computer to memorize it. But since I only have one, I like to be able to fit them by hand just like you would a manual machine. There we go, perfect. No play, and we're going to make sure it screws all the way up to the shoulder. Which it does, and the bolt works. The program I got written, I already pre-measured the bolt clearance and everything, so we're good to go there. So the next step we're going to do is our drilling process. Okay, drilling process. We're going to grab this bit, and we're going to push cycle start again. And just like all my other tools, I got my drill bit right there offset to the chuck too. So everything just work shifted. I'm going to go 25% rapid, cycle start. I'm going to turn on a little coolant here just to keep that bit cool. Don't need a bunch of coolant, just a little. It's going to go in there, and I go 1 1/4 inches deep. I use a 7/16 drill bit on the Creedmoor cases and the Winchester cases. I was using a 29/64 drill bit, but that was just a little bigger than I liked. So I switched over to the 7/16. This is actually the first one I've done with the 7/16. Hopefully I wrote my program right for my boring bar, but I think I did. Of course. That slipped. Grr. Alright. Going in and drilling. There we are. That's the last peck. Next thing is going to happen. Going to take this off. Blow it off. Now it's going to come by and we're going to use our boring tool right here. And we're going to bore out this chamber. I'll shut off the coolant. Going to recheck my tool offsets. Okay, and then go memory and then cycle start. So like I said, this is the first time I run the program with a 7/16 drill bit, but perfect. Life is wonderful. So I'm going to turn on the coolant to flush out them chips. I make the back of the chamber 460 thousandths and the front of the chamber, or towards the front, down to 440 thousandths. So it kind of tapers in. We want the reamer to go in there and be able to engage something when it starts cutting. It's going to come back out, take another pass. So I'm going to shut this off. Now we're making the chamfer for the bullet to go into, or the case to go into. Now it's doing a finishing pass. It doesn't seem like it's cutting much, but you got to remember on a lathe, if you cut on one side 1,000th, it's going to actually open up the whole 2,000ths because you're cutting on both sides of the diameter. We'll flush out the chips again. So now that's gonna take one more little whisker of a pass. So the reason we got to bore these out is the drill bit doesn't fall, it just follows the old hole. And the old hole might not be perfect. And drill bits tend to wander a little bit when they cut. So now we know that the lands and the grooves and everything of the barrel 100% concentric to the hole that we just reamed. Alright, I got some blue dicum in there. The reason I do that is to know I didn't cut my chamber too big with the boring bar. Also, you can use a old shell casing to make sure it doesn't fit. Let's talk about reamer holders for a second. So this is a 22 Creedmoor reamer, and I make sure that it goes in there and the pilot is able to get in contact or go in the bore, just like this one is. So there's two different, there's a whole bunch of ways to hold a reamer. Some guys ream by hand, and it's really easy to open up a chamber doing that, so I don't recommend that. Some guys use a pusher that push against the back of the reamer and hold it by hand, kind of a floating reamer, so they can see what happens. That works. I just don't like doing it that way. I prefer the machine to do the work. So letting the machine do the work, you can do a floating reamer holder or a rigid reamer holder. 90% of the time, I use a JSG floating reamer holder. The reason I can get away with it is that the pilot is holding me perfectly centered to the bore, and this reamer can float on the back end here around and round. And I sweep this with an indicator and get this perfectly concentric to the bore. Most of the time, I don't have any chatter issues. And since we bored the chamber out with that boring bar, and we indicated the bore perfectly concentric before we did the drilling and the boring process with our cardboard boring bar, the reamer has no choice but to follow the old hole. So this is a wonderful tool until you get chatter. If I get chatter, I switch over to this. And if I had a machine where I couldn't drill and pre-bore my chambers like I do, I'd only use a rigid reaming holder. But these things take a while to set up and indicate. Because remember, a lathe tool cuts on both sides. So if we take a 1/2 thousandths on this side, it's going to open up the hole 1/1000th. So this head that I built moves in a swivel pattern just like our chuck does. And then I have a minute adjustment for our vertical height, and I can use our minute adjustment in our X to get our, we'll call it X height, or to get everything centered up with the spindle of the machine so we don't oversize the chamber. Hands down, this is way more forgiving than any floating reamer holder. When I do them Tikas, a lot of times the chamber is so far off on the factory 22250. When I convert them to 22 Creedmoor, I have to use a rigid reamer holder because the hole isn't perfectly round, even though I bore it down in the bottom. So I use this to keep everything straight to get a perfectly new chamber. So most of the time, I can get away with a floating reamer holder. So that's what I'm going to do. It saves time, and I get no run out at the end of the process. So I'm going to put the reamer in here. We're going to set our offset, and then we're going to start the reaming process. All right, at the reamer in there, we're going to go cycle start. It's going to move over on the center line of the spindle and start reaming. But I need to set my work set offset. So I'm not going to buy a different reamer for every different chamber, or reamer holder for every different chamber. What I need to do is put collars here so it goes up against the stop for my G55 offsets. But on my reamers I use a G54 offset. So we're going to reset the program, and we're going to use this shoulder right here against the face of the breech to set our offsets. So I just go in like so, forward, real slow, just in case we are cutting. Okay, we're there. I'm going to go to the computer and set my offset. So now I got to tell the computer that's where our face is because all my cuts are off this face. And then we're going to push play and do the reaming cycle. All right, my dog bowl contraption here, like so. And then I'm going to shift you guys over so you guys can enjoy this. And I wrote 3 different programs to ream. The first one's going to go in 1/2 inch and start our initial reaming process. Then we're going to do our pecking cycles. Then pull out, we got to do our headspace measurement. And after a headspace measurement, we'll do our final peck. So I'm going to turn on some coolant, get some flow going here, and push cycle start. Now it's going to come in and start cutting. And we're cutting 4 thousandths per rev on this one. And that goes in pretty quick. And this first plunge goes 1/2 inch. And the reason I go 1/2 inch is to get that reamer in good contact. So when it starts doing its pecking cycles, we don't get no chatting. There's our first cycle. It went in 1/2 inch. Now it's going to go back. And now it's just going to start its peck cycle. And it'll do that until it's done. In and out. So now we'll speed it up. I'm going to switch you over to a time lapse and we'll come back when she's done. Alright, I think we're coming up pretty close to our last pass. Yep. There's that. Shut this off. We're going to blow all our coolant out. And then we're going to have a go gauge, and we're going to see how much deeper we got to go with the chamber. So here's a go gauge. Goes in there nice. Okay. Got my action right here. And this shouldn't go. Screw this bad boy on here. Alright. Had a phone call, so it kind of interrupted us, but let's get back. So I use feeler gauges. I go tight, tight, tight against the shoulder. 3 thousandths fits. 4 thousandths doesn't. So I'd say we've got a 3.5 thousandths gap between the shoulder and the receiver. So now we got to rewrite our program. So we're going to go memory. We're going to get edit. And this is our last drilling cycle here. So we went to 3,000, on our last program, we'll go up here a little bit. You can see the last program. We went 1.365 deep, okay? So now that we did that, we need to go an extra 3.5 plus 2 thousandths, so 5.5 thousandths deeper. So we're going to go down to here, and we're going to edit that, okay? We're going to go Z minus 1.3705 and enter. So we have 365 thousandths. We got to go 5.5 thousandths deeper. So we got Z minus 3705. And we can't have two things in our code, so we're going to delete that. So what it's going to do is what this is telling us. It's going to start feeding at negative 1.35. That's where it's going to start feeding. It's going to take a 50 thousandths peck. That means how deep it's going to go. Once it gets to this number, it's going to dwell for 1.5 seconds. And it's going to go in there really slow at 8 thou per rev. And after that, it's just going to stop because I told the program to stop. So the machine's going to stop, the spindle's going to stop turning, and then I'll back it out by hand so we don't scratch up the chamber. So now that we did all that, we're going to go to memory, overwrite the end of the program, enter. That sends it over to here, reset, into the program, and now we're going to go up here, and we're going to verify. Z minus 375. Perfect. All right, so we got that in there. We'll go up here. We'll unscrew our action. And once the action's unscrewed, I'll come back and we'll push cycle start and it'll do it. All right, I'm going to turn on some coolant. We're going to go 5% rapid. Go in. This last one I kind of like to go slow so we don't scratch nothing. Let it go in nice and slow. And like I told you, it's going to start feeding at 350 thousandths and then it'll just stop. Just like that. And now we're completely chambered to depth. So we'll take this out. Shut off our coolant. Put on our Alright, the air compressor shut off so I can talk. Put this in here, and it goes. Okay, life is good. Now we're going to grab our no-go gauge. And we only took a 2,000ths peck, so it should be good to go. We're going to trust and verify. And hard stop. Won't go. So now we got our head spaced. We'll take it out and do our contouring. So prior to doing the contouring, I don't think I'm going to do that on film. Alright, let's do our chamber inspection. So you can see we're bouncing beautifully right there. That's just in front of the lands. We go out a little bit. This is where our lead or neck is. Go back down. This is the neck area. Nothing. Here's our shoulder. Nothing in our shoulder. Here's our body. Let's go down to the body here. Nothing in here. And we're going to go all the way to the end and stop. And there's the needle. You can see we're resting on here. So we got virtually no run out in this chamber. And the only way I've been able to accomplish it is one, holding on to the barrel extremely rigidly. Delron, copper wire, any other way but directly to the barrel, or an aluminum collar that's tapered to the barrel for a contoured blank, you'll get movement. Second most important thing, drilling and boring the chamber with the boring bar. That ensures that you got a hole that's drilled and it's bored to the chamber. So the spindle spins that we indicated the barrel to. The boring bar is going to cut it identically to the spindle, single point, so the reamer has a perfect place or perfect hole to go down and match the spindle so it can't get out of concentricity. And third, I don't think it matters whether you're using a floating reamer or a rigid reamer, but some sort of a reamer holder that's perfectly in line to the bore and not held by hand. Because once you get off center and not using a rigid holder of some sort, when I say rigid meaning straight in and out, like using your hand, you could get a little cut deeper on one side than the other, and as that cut gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it produces run out in the chamber. So that's my thoughts, that's my feelings, this is how I do it, that's why I do it, and I get consistent chamber after chamber after chamber with zero run out, just like this. So now we know it measures good. Let's go inside and look what the chamber looks like unmolested. You can see I got the blue dicom still on there, just to see what kind of finish we got. Alright, objects in me are bigger than they appear. Could never be more true. So we're going to go in and we're going to watch the chamber. Everything is good. Now we're going up into the shoulder area. Everything's good there. Now we're in the neck. No issues in the neck. This area right here where the neck junction is, that's usually good for a burr or something. That's why I use that dwell in the program. That dwell gets rid of the burr. And then our lead, I can hold it still, all our lead is the same. And then I'm going to go to the end of the lands. And all our lands are identical. So now, we know we have a chamber that looks perfect and measures perfect. Alright, we're going to speed up the spindle. And I go 750 RPM. And we're just going to go in and we're just going to touch up the bore with some red Scotch-Brite. And guys started requesting me to do this. They don't like a really shiny chamber. They said they want something for the brass to bite against. Don't know if it's good or bad. It's been requested enough times that I do it. Take some emery cloth, even though it's not needed. Kind of touch up the threads here, just in case you got any sharp burrs. Clean up the breech face here. Take my thumb, make sure that chamfer doesn't have no rough spots. Stop it, take a little brake clean, clean her up, blow it off, and now it is ready for contouring. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. Man, it's so shiny, it's blinding the camera. But you can see how everything turned out really, really nice. So next thing we're going to do is take it out and contour it. But I'm going to batch do them. So I'm going to stop this video here. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. And as always, God bless.